First of all, thank you so much, everyone who has RSVP'd and shown an interest in the 5-year program. This is really a great showing for us, and I'm very excited to meet every single one of you and to work with you. I'm going to let my colleagues here introduce themselves. Julia Eng from ISP and Natalie Eicher from Political Science. Julia, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I just want to thank you all for coming to the application and personal statement workshop that we're having. It's so good to see that many of you are interested in applying this year. So it's great to see such a great turnout. I am Julia Ng, an advisor with the International Studies program, and I will soon take on the joint degree programs with GPS. So you'll be seeing me more in the future if you get accepted. And yeah, it's great to see you all. And I'll pass it to Natalie.
Thanks, Julia. Hi, everyone. My name is Natalie Eicher, and I'm the undergrad advisor for the Department of Political Science. So I do see some familiar names and faces, and I appreciate you all for being here. And hopefully you learn a lot. This is a wonderful program, and at least for the political science students, the first cohort for the BAMIA program will be finishing their first year this upcoming spring. So we are very excited to see where their success leads them. And again, thank you all for being here today.
Okay, so along the way, please feel free to put questions in the chat. One of us will try to get to those, but I'll also keep an eye on the chat so that in case anything comes up that I think really needs to be addressed right away, I'll respond, but we'll give you an opportunity at the end also to ask questions and directly. And so, you know, we want to make sure that you have all the information that you need so that you feel comfortable going away into the application system and thinking about how to go forward. I'm Nancy Gilson. I'm the Director of Academic Degree Programs for the School of Global Policy and Strategy. I'm also the Administrative Director of the International Studies program. I've overseen the 5-year programs for almost 11 years and was worked closely with faculty in the development of the curriculum of the 5-year program with political science and the 5-year program with the economics department. And so all 3 of these programs are near and dear to my heart. When I first took over ISP, we had 2 BAMIAs a year. In the last year that we admitted just ISP students, we admitted 29. This year in total, we admitted over 40 students across all 3 programs. So we've worked hard to make this work and want you guys to, you know, feel comfortable in applying and have an idea of what you get out of the program. So first, you know, let me say that along the way, my email address is going to come up on the screen. And I want to invite you to use it and send me an email and meet with me by appointment or, you know, send me an email and ask questions in a written form, whatever you're most comfortable with. So we're going to get started. We're going to start by talking about the application itself. And then in the second half, talk about a statement of purpose. The starting point on both of these is that these are quite different than the application that you submitted when you applied as undergraduates. And so the application itself is much more simplified. And the statement of purpose is quite different from what you did, less about you as a whole person than you with an intellectual interest and a career goal. And so I wanted to have this workshop so that we could make sure that you submitted the strongest application possible. So where can you find the application? You've got 2 URLs in front of you. You can go in through the GPS website. Julie has also put them in the chat. You can go in through the GPS website. I put that first because I want to encourage you actually to go to the GPS website where you'll see a discussion of the programs. If you look under, you know, at the MPP or the MIA curriculum, you'll see what the coursework is. Poke around on the website in general, the links to students and see what people are doing. Look at the faculty and see, what their research is on and what they teach. So you really have an idea of the identity of the place and the sort of dynamism of the place, and the opportunities for classes. So you have the two web pages here. The other one is the general application through graduate division. Despite the fact that you're applying to attend your first year, you'll be undergraduates. You're actually applying to a graduate program. So you can find that through graduate division. You are, depending on which department you're in, if you're an ISP, you're applying to IR 75. So when you go into the application, it's going to ask you to choose a program, and you are applying to IR 75. If you're in the political science department, you're going to apply to GP 77. And if you're in the economics department, you're going to apply to GP 76. So, it'll ask you, that's the most important, one of the most important things that you'll need to know. You're also it's going to ask you the quarter for which you're applying. And the quarter for which you're applying is actually the first quarter that you'll be matriculated to graduate standing. Again, you're applying to a graduate program, which will be fall of 23. So if you're applying this April, you'll actually start graduate classwork in fall of 22. But because you're submitting an application to a graduate program, this quarter that you'll actually be a graduate student is fall of 23. So you'll choose the major code and make sure you choose the proper quarter, because otherwise your application won't come up in my queue on the application site. Okay, so make sure you write those two most important things of just beginning and getting into the application. Okay. The deadline for the application is April 10th at midnight. We don't extend the application unless for some reason the system goes down. It's a fairly straightforward application, so you shouldn't have any difficulty with it. Again, it's much more simplified than what you did when you applied as an undergrad to be an undergraduate. So the application itself is something that you can do pretty much in an evening. It's the statement of purpose that I recommend you begin to start thinking about now. Julia, next slide. Yes, you're right. April 10th is a Sunday. Apologies for the typo. The application overview. So you go into the application and again, choose the right program and right quarter. For the application, you need a statement of purpose, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and there's some optional essays. These are things about, COVID impact, diversity statements, adversity statement. These are optional. You don't have to fill them out. Some people copy and paste from their statement of purpose into those. Some people submit those separately. They tell us more about you, but not doing them is not something that's going to keep you from being admitted to the program. Okay, so they really are genuinely optional. A resume, we'll talk about that in more detail. 2 recommendations. Now, one of the things about the recommendations, and again, we'll talk about what a strong recommendation is in a minute. Your recommenders do not need to submit letters. These are electronic recommendations. So you will input names and email addresses into the application website. And then the website sends them a request for the recommendation, and they go into the website and then do the application entirely online. They can submit a letter if they want to. But the piece of the recommendation that they have to do is the electronic piece, and then the letter is optional. And then transcripts. We take the unofficial academic history that you all look at, where you see where you're, what classes you've taken. If you're a transfer student and all of your transfer work is on your academic history, which it almost certainly is, that's fine. We don't need a separate transcript for this application. Okay. So your resume, let's start with this. And I see the questions in the chat, and I'm going to get to you. Okay, don't worry about it. Upload a PDF version of your current professional resume. Now, look, I know that most of you are undergraduates here, straight out of high school. You don't have a 5-page resume where you've spent 2 years working for Morgan Stanley and 3 summers in the Pfizer lab. And you don't have 2 pages of research publications. So don't feel the need, don't be embarrassed by a 1-page resume, and don't feel the need to add stuff. What we want to see is any employment experience that you've had. We want to see all the things that kind of fill you out as a human being. Leadership positions on and off campus. Are you a member of a club on campus? Are you a member of a club off campus? Have you been the choir director at your church or in the local city hall? Have you been a coach of a peewee soccer team? Were you the captain of a baseball team when you were in high school, and so on? Volunteer positions that you've had, internships that you've done, student organization involvement, including in high school. Were you on the debate team? Were you, involved in some clubs there? Research projects that you've worked on. Have you been a research assistant for an instructor? Have you had the opportunity to do independent research yourself? What are those? What have those projects been on? What's their title? What were they for? Were they for an organization that you worked for? Did your internship require you to do a research project or something like that? And then skills that you've developed. Are you bilingual, multilingual? Do you have a whole package full of computer coding languages? All of this, we're not looking for anything specific here. Like, we're only going to take you if you're bilingual and R and you've worked summers in a fancy internship. We're looking for, a sense of you having a broad set of interests and things that you've done, so that when you settle into a graduate class with people who are coming in having worked after being undergraduates, that you feel comfortable in that environment. And so, we want to make sure that you're gonna settle in and feel as if the program is responsive to you as well. Yep, you can submit a 2-page resume. I just don't want you to feel like it has to be a certain length. Your recommendation. So let me see if I can answer some of the questions that you have also about the recommendation. So you need 2 recommendations. At least one of these should be an academic recommendation, because we want someone who can talk about, the quality of your academic work, your curiosity. Do you have any research experience? How well you write? They're going to be asked to rank, sort of reply to a set of ranking questions in the application system. And these are, it's a broad range of questions about how well you take supervision, how, do you turn in work on time? Do you show up at work on time? If they want to submit a letter, the letters have to be in English. you know, the references are submitted directly online to the system. If the electronic references are done online, the letters are submitted directly online. And then the recommender has to be able to provide us with complete contact information so that we can respond to them, for example, and say that their recommendation didn't come all the way through, or they didn't answer all the questions, okay? You should, with respect to when to ask for the recommendations, you should start asking for them now. Tell people, ask people that you're going to, you want to submit their names. Again, you can reassure them that they don't have to write letters. That's going to make people a sigh of relief. And, you know, you can think about who's going to give you a strong recommendation, right? Who's going to be able to really speak to you fully as someone who wants to go to graduate school, what you're interested in the long run, who knows something about, you know, your time at school. It can be someone, if you're a transfer student from your community college, it can be somebody who supervised you in an internship or a job. You know, think hard about someone who can really answer questions, short answer questions about who you are, right? So again, you know, I'd like to see one academic recommendation. And yes, it can be a TA from a class. I saw somebody ask that in the chat. We designed this specifically so that someone can identify themselves as having been a TA. Look, I'm fully aware of the fact that a lot of you are in huge classes and you don't know the professor at the front of the room because they're a long way away, and they're not the ones that you work with in TA sessions. You don't go to their office hours, and that's fine, which is why we now allow TA recommendations for the 5-year program. They often know you a lot better than having some big deal name on campus. Who's basically going to tell me, yep, they got an A in my class, and that's sort of all they know about you, and they know that about you because they looked at their grade sheet, right? So it should be someone who knows you well enough to, you know, to give us personal answers about you. So reach out to them early, give them plenty of time. Tell them to watch their email so that they get the prompt. If it's a professional reference or an academic reference, it should be their professional or academic email address that you give us, not their personal email, okay? So we know who they are and where they've come from. It allows us to kind of measure the recommendation itself. They're going to be asked how long they've known you. They're going to be asked the context in which they've known you. So again, feel free to prompt them in this way. A lot of people need to be reminded of when they met you and how they met you, particularly if it's someone that you haven't seen for a while, okay? Or a TA that you haven't known very long. You just had them in a class last fall. And so you need to remind them, that's fine, okay? The letter's not a requirement, even if, I want to answer this question because it's come up a couple of times in the chat. No one is required to submit a letter. Anyone can submit a letter. What is required is the electronic responses. The letter is optional, even if it's a non-UCSD recommender, okay? So transcripts, again, we're asking only for right now for an unofficial transcript, so your academic history. And again, if you're a transfer student, make sure that all of your transfer work is on there. If all of your college level work is shown on your academic history, then that's it. You will not be asked for an official transcript until you graduate with your bachelor's degree. If you're applying this year, then June of 23, when you graduate with your bachelor's degree. At that point, when we actually then nominate you for matriculation to graduate level, the university will require a formal transcript to show that your bachelor's degree has been awarded. That's standard. Everyone who's applying to graduate school, whether through this program or, you know, from outside of UCSD into a master's or a PhD program, has to provide an official transcript. The weird thing is that even though the registrar is a floor away from graduate division, you have to request the transfer exactly as you would if you were sending it across the country. And the process takes, you know, 2 or 3 days. Okay, so just be prepared for that. But we monitor to make sure that we get your transcripts at that point. But right now it's very simple, just a copy of your academic history. I'm going to talk about your personal statement in some detail, but let me, sort of give you a broad outline here. Again, as I said to you, this is not the kind of personal statement that you wrote when you applied to be an undergraduate. First of all, you most likely had a set of prompts that you had to answer, or you could choose one from a series of 3 or 4. This is really a personal statement where you have to decide what you want to talk about. And what we're really interested in is what are you interested in? Like what's the thing that interests you? Where did you first become interested in it? What have you done to develop that interest? Have you had internships? Have you taken classes? Have you had the opportunity to work for someone where that interest was sort of developed, right? And then why do you think that getting an MPP or a Master's in International Affairs sort of furthers that interest and helps you develop yourself in such a way that you're going to be attractive to an employer, right? So we'll talk about that in more detail in a minute. But then, you're going to be asked about these sort of additional essays where you can talk about your leadership, you can talk about adversity and the way that has affected your education or that's driven your intellectual interests. You can talk about social justice issues that drive you, ethical questions that are central to understanding your intellectual interests. I want you to think about, what it is, what's the intellectual thing that drives you, and what do you want to do with it, and all of the kind of dimensions of it, right? So let me talk a little bit about what the personal statement is not, okay? And so this should help you think about what it is. I'm not interested in a personal statement that's sort of the history of an idea or profession, right? That begins telling me about the history of the development, for example, the example that I give you here. And I admit that these are somewhat sarcastic and flippant, as is sort of the way I operate. But, I don't need to have a history of the development of human rights law. What I'm interested in is what in human rights law interests you, right? You may be interested in the history of it, but that's not central to understanding what you're going to study at GPS, right? It's not a statement of something obvious. As I said, being healthy is the foundational requirement for leading a productive life. That's obvious. If you're interested in health policy, the question is, what in health policy are you interested in? Are you interested in sort of disparate health outcomes depending upon class? Are you interested in the problem of how poor countries provide health care to people? Are you interested in disparities of treatment of people based on race? Are you interested in the effects of mining on people's health? So, specificity here, right? I'm also, while I hope to get to know each one of you and know a little bit about your background, this is also not a statement about your family history. You will have the opportunity to talk about, in the optional questions, to talk about your family, if there's adversity that you had to overcome to come to to get to the university, if there are things that you think it's important we know about you in order to understand your interests, you can talk about those. But in general, again, your background is not going to get you into the program. It's the intellectual interest that comes out of your background that's going to get you into the program, right? So this isn't the story of your life either, you know, that you're going to tell me that since the age of 3, you've been reading Dickens and you started studying Latin at the age of 6. Those are all very interesting things, and I hope we have an opportunity to talk about them. You know, but you know, that you started an interest in statesmanship in kindergarten and now want to be an ambassador to Australia. The latter part of that is interesting. You want to be an ambassador. So how do you, you know, so what do you think you need to know now to be an ambassador, right? So again, this isn't a biography. It's not a family biography. It's an intellectual biography, if you will. So this is really the slide that tells you a little bit about, you know, about what we're looking for in your personal statement. What is the thing that you're interested in? Health policy analysis, business startups, helping entrepreneurs with, you know, financial management, NGOs, sports marketing, alternative energy sources, public-private partnerships in the development of energy resources, learning how to do GIS so that you can map health outcomes with deforestation. Those are the kinds of things that we want you to know. I don't expect you to have like a fully developed notion about what these things are. You're applying to graduate school because you want to get to a fully developed notion of them. But now you have this thing that you're interested in. What is that thing, right? And when did you first recognize that you were interested in that thing? You had a job that meant that you got to read files on this thing. You had an internship. You worked for your parents growing up and they owned a medical supply company, or they worked in, they were migrants and picked coffee, and you became interested in labor organizing. That you grew up without health care and noticed that people who had health care when you went to school, you know, didn't miss as many days of school. You took classes that all of a sudden made you think, oh, this is a really interesting thing. Gee, I'm interested in this, right? Moving around the world with your parents. You're an army brat and you've lived all over the world, and that gave you an opportunity to think broadly about the way that international affairs really does structure, you know, where things are peaceful and where there's conflict, and why do some countries get along with others and not everybody gets along very well. So what is sort of where, you know, when did you first recognize that, right? And of course, why is it interesting, or why is it important? If you're going to study it for 2 years, tell me why it will get you out of bed and get you to class every morning. Like, what is it that you still need to know? Why is it interesting? Why does it drive you more than something else, right? And then how does the, you know, what do you want to do with it? You want to go into the private sector. You want to go work for a bank. You want to go work for a tech company. You want to have your own startup. You want to go into public sector. You want to work for the US government. You want to work for a foreign government. You want to work for an NGO, you want to work for a multilateral, you want to be at the UN, you want to start your own business. What is it, right? And then how do you think the BAMIA or the BAMPP is going to get you there, okay? Why do you need to take classes to do that thing that, you know, that GPS has to offer? And here the thing really is to look at the classes that we offer. Don't drop a bunch of names. We all know who the faculty are, but like, what does GPS do that's going to be the value added for you when you get here? You know, what do you hope to take classes in? What do you hope to get out of them? Julia? So, you know, this is really a kind of standard analytic argument or analytic essay, if you will. Tell us about the circumstances. The very first paragraph should have these things. You know, tell us about the circumstances that helped you recognize your interest, where you grew up, your first job. You were forced to take a certain set of classes, and all of a sudden you developed this interest. You've been an athlete your whole life and realized somewhere along the way, after meeting somebody, that sports was a good way to change the world for kids or something, that you've taken a bunch of education classes and now you're interested in education policy. The first paragraph should be a paragraph that tells us what that thing is that you're interested in and where you first recognized it as a thing to be interested in, right? And then from there, you know, the essay develops 2 pages, 2.5 pages, not more than 3. It does not need to be a long essay. It just needs to be one that's, you know, clearly articulates what you're interested in, why you want to be, you know, why you want to be in graduate school to study it, and what you want to be when you get out of here. So why study that thing, right? Usually we study things because they're complicated or they're a puzzle. And so again, you know, finish your essay by telling me what's the value added by going to graduate school. Are there certain skills that you think you're going to get? Don't tell me that you just need a master's degree. I know that. Tell me, what are the skills that you hope to develop? You know, what are the countries that you hope to study? What are the complex debates about this thing that you hope to understand better? Are there case studies or a particular professor that you think is going to help you understand these things better, right? So why study it? That's really what you want to sort of get to by the end of your essay. What is it? How is it developed over time? And then, you know, why is it interesting? And then why study it to get a degree in it? Okay. And then, you know, thinking about what you want to be when you get out and how a GPS helps you do that. No one is going to hold you to this. I'm not going to come back to you in 2 years and say, you said that you wanted to work at the UN, and now you're telling me you want to go to work for Google. We wasted our time on you. My hope is that you come in wanting to do something and you leave, in fact, doing something else. If GPS does its job, if studying something for the first time in depth does what it should do, it should force you to have an identity crisis. It should force you all of a sudden to realize that there are a lot of interesting things in the world, and what you thought was a world with one interesting thing is now a world with a lot of interesting things. And so you get here, and at the beginning of your second year, you decide that you're really not interested in international management. What you really want to study is environmental governance, and you do that, right? But this is just you know, the essay is trying to get you to think about how what you're interested in is connected to something that's actually in the world. So right now, you know, what kind of a job do you think you want to have? You want to be a policy analyst. You want to be, you know, you want to run an NGO. You want to be in a PR firm for a corporation. You know, what's the job that you want, right? And you know, what do you know about GPS and you know, how it's going to help you get there, right? So as I said to you when we talked about the application, spend some time poking around the GPS website. Look at this stuff on alumni and where alumni are all over the world and where people are getting jobs who are coming out of GPS. And what faculty are doing and what students say they're doing and the clubs at GPS and the kinds of things that go on here that direct your interest once you're in the program. In a nutshell, right, your statement of purpose for an application to graduate school should tell a story arc, right? What are you interested in? How did you become interested in it? What have you done to build out that interest so far? What specifically you hope to get out of the 5-year program? Where do you want to be in 5 years? Where do you think now you want to be in 5 years? Where do you want to be in 20 years, right? So there's a kind of arc to this. A lot of it is going to be speculation, but what I'm interested in is getting a sense of how far along you are and what your interests are, and understanding what your interests are and being able to talk about what your interests are, and what you hope the next step is in really developing those interests. The identity crisis. Yes, Patrick, yet again, another identity crisis for you. So once you apply, what happens? You will be notified by email about admission to the program prior to the enrollment for fall classes. We make sure that that's the case. So you apply on April 10th, and within 2 or 3 weeks from that, you'll get an email telling you your admission status. Many of the BAMIAs, whether you're an ISP or political science, may be required to attend summer prep, depending upon whether you have a background in economics or in methodology. The BAMPPs get out of that because you've had a year of econometrics and a year of a sequence in micro and a sequence in macro. Some of the political science students and some of the ISP students also have backgrounds that will not require them to go to prep. Prep is not intended to be punitive. You're not being punished for what you haven't done, but really it's an opportunity to sort of lay a foundation. And just so you know, sort of 80% of the incoming class will be required to do prep, and that includes the students applying to the 2-year program, because most of them have not had any microeconomics, or they haven't had math. They went to a liberal arts school that didn't require them to do any STEM, or it's been 5 or 10 years since they took it, or they got crap grades in math or whatever, right? So this summer can be, in fact, a lot of fun because there's a lot of community building that goes on in prep. And so far from being punitive, it really does introduce you to the first couple weeks of the curriculum in the fall, so that you go in sort of understanding what the work in the fall is going to be like. Right? If you are required to do prep, that will be communicated to you either with your offer of admission or very soon after. You'll hear about that from me. And then, matriculation into the second year is conditional until you've completed the core, which is all of the graduate courses you take as a senior in good standing. And so that means B grades. That's the same standard that's applied to the graduate students who come into the 2-year program. I'm here to tell you that very, very few 5-year students don't make it into the second-year program, and most of them don't go into this. The ones who don't go into the second-year program are the ones generally who opt out on their own. Almost no one in the 10 years that I've run the program, I can count on one hand the number of 5-year students, and only part of the fingers on one hand, the number of 5-year students who didn't make it into the second year. So that's not really something that you should worry about, okay? And then at the end of your senior year, you'll be nominated for graduate standing. And then you'll have to go back into the application system and accept that offer and provide an official transcript, but we'll explain that all to you when you get to that point. It's not complicated, but it's something you have to remember to do. Okay. Social media, y'all are about social media. I know that. And so here are places where you should be following social media for GPS so that you can see what we do. One of the things that you should know is that GPS has a very good career services department. They will help you find internships for between your senior and your graduate year in the program. They help you with funding for that internship, if it's an internship that's abroad or for which you're going to need housing. And then they will help you find a job in your graduate year so that you can get out of the program and walk into a career that you've decided is the one you want to have. Is housing available for students required? It's not. Housing is not available for the summer. You will not be eligible for graduate housing until you're actually a graduate student. And so whatever housing you have right now on campus is the housing you'll have to be in for the summer. Okay. So if you have questions, we're going to give you an opportunity here to ask questions, and I'm going to see whether there are things that either Julia or Natalie have flagged that I should answer in the chat. But these are also email addresses that you can use. Mine is at the top. Please email me if you have questions. But also the International Studies program, the VAC for political science. If you have questions about your remaining undergraduate requirements, you should be talking to your department. If you have questions about applying, whether you're eligible to apply, what it's like at GPS, what courses you'll have to take at GPS, then I'm the person to talk to about that. But if you're in political science and you want to know what you have left for political science, talk to Natalie. If you are in international studies and you have questions about ISP classes, you can go to the VAC, you can email ISP, and similarly for the economics department, use the VAC, but I'm here sort of for all other questions, right? Summer prep is in person. Again, we do a lot of community building. We think that being on the ground and going to the TA sessions is important. Summer prep is sort of intensive. And so if you're required to do prep, your admission to the program will be provisional on that. Julie has put the website URL in the chat if you want to look at what summer prep would be. Look, I want to thank you all for showing up. It's, you know, as I said, I've overseen this program for a long time. It's very much near and dear to my heart, and I sort of think about the 5-year students as sort of my students. So I hope to get to know all of you and work with you all and get to know you better. Okay, but send me an email if you have a question. Bye. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.